The photograph arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under the door of Park Jin-woo's private office in an unmarked manila envelope. No return address, no note. Just a single image printed on glossy paper that would shatter the carefully constructed walls of one of Seoul's most feared crime bosses. Jin-woo didn't open his own mail. That was what subordinates were for, but his right-hand man, Kang Min-ho, had learned long ago to recognize when something required the boss's immediate attention. The envelope had weight to it, substance. And it had bypassed every security checkpoint, every scanner, every guard in the building. Someone wanted Jin-woo to see whatever was inside. Someone with access, someone dangerous. "Boss," Min-ho said, placing the envelope on the massive mahogany desk. This came through unconventional channels. Jin-woo looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing. His organization moved money through 17 different legitimate businesses across Seoul, Busan, and Incheon. Real estate, entertainment venues, import-export companies. The numbers always needed his personal attention. Every one accounted for. Every transaction traceable only to him. He was 34 years old and had been running the Gumsong faction for 6 years. Ever since his predecessor had made the fatal mistake of underestimating Jin-woo's ambition. In this world, you either rose to the position of Tumak, the boss, or you died trying. Jin-woo had risen, and he'd made sure everyone remembered how. His fingers were long and elegant, more suited to a pianist than a gangster, but they'd broken bones and pulled triggers when necessary. Now they picked up the envelope, feeling its weight, assessing the threat it might contain. Anthrax? Unlikely. A photograph was more probable. In their world, photographs meant blackmail, evidence, or warnings. He slid it open with the silver letter opener that had once belonged to the previous boss. Jin-woo kept it as a reminder. The past always catches up. The photograph slid out onto his desk, and for the first time in 6 years, Park Jin-woo felt his carefully maintained composure crack. The image showed a woman standing in what looked like a small playground. She was pushing a child on a swing, her head thrown back in laughter, her natural hair caught in the sunlight. But it was the child that made Jin-woo's blood run cold. A little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with his eyes. His exact eyes. The same distinctive almond shape, the same intense dark brown that appeared almost black in certain light. She had his high cheekbones too. The angular structure of his face softened by youth and femininity, but unmistakable. The woman was Imani Jefferson. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he'd last seen her. Jin-woo's mind raced backward, counting months, calculating dates. 5 years ago, he'd been consolidating power, making the final moves that would position him to take over the organization. There had been violence, blood, risk. And in the middle of all that chaos, there had been Imani. She'd been a translator working for one of his legitimate businesses, brought in to handle negotiations with American partners. She spoke Korean fluently, her accent carrying just a trace of her native English that he'd found unexpectedly charming. She was smart, quick-witted, and absolutely unimpressed by his status. When she looked at him, she didn't see a crime boss. She saw a man. Just a man. They'd had 3 months together. 3 months of stolen moments, of pretending he was someone different, someone normal. 3 months of feeling something other than the constant vigilance and calculated coldness his position demanded. She'd made him laugh. She'd challenged him. She'd made him want a different life. And then she disappeared. He'd returned from a particularly brutal territorial dispute to find her apartment empty, her job abandoned, her phone disconnected. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just gone, like she'd never existed. He'd searched for her, quietly but thoroughly. His people had connections everywhere, but Imani had vanished so completely that even he couldn't find her. Now he knew why. "Find her," Jin-woo said, his voice deadly calm. "Find them both. I want to know where they are, how they live, who watches them, who knows about them. I want every detail of their lives on my desk by tomorrow morning." Min-ho nodded, already reaching for his phone. "And when we locate them?" Jin-woo looked at the photograph again, his finger tracing the little girl's face. His daughter. He had a daughter. The knowledge was overwhelming, terrifying, and awakening something in him he'd thought long dead. "When you find them," Jin-woo said slowly, "you don't touch them, you don't approach them. You don't even let them know we're watching. Just information. That's all I need for now." But even as he said it, Jin-woo knew it was a lie. Information wouldn't be enough. Not anymore. That child carried his blood. In his world, blood meant everything. It meant loyalty, inheritance, protection. It meant she was his responsibility, whether Imani had wanted that or not. After Minho left, Jin-woo remained at his desk, staring at the photograph. The Gyeomseong faction controlled significant portions of Seoul's nightlife, their protection rackets extending into legitimate businesses that paid willingly to avoid trouble. They laundered money through construction companies, moved illegal goods through the port of Incheon, and maintained a network of corrupt officials that reached into the highest levels of local government. Jin-woo had built an empire on fear and efficiency. He was known for being ruthless when crossed, but fair to those who showed loyalty. His men respected him not just because they feared him, but because he'd proven himself capable of protecting them, of making them wealthy, of building something that would last beyond any single man's lifetime. But all of that power, all of that control, meant nothing if he couldn't protect his own child. The photograph hadn't arrived by accident. Someone knew about the girl. Someone had taken the time to find her, photograph her, and deliver that information to Jin-woo in a way that circumvented his security. That meant several things, none of them good. It meant his enemies knew about a vulnerability he hadn't known existed. It meant the child was potentially already in danger. And it meant Imani's careful disappearance had ultimately failed to keep their daughter safe. Jin-woo stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. His office was on the top floor of a building his organization owned through 3 shell companies. From here, he could see the city he'd claimed, the territory he defended, the empire he'd built. But what good was any of it if he couldn't claim his own daughter? The question that haunted him, though, was why. Why had Imani hidden this from him? They'd parted badly, yes, but not that badly. He'd never hurt her, never threatened her. When she'd left, he'd been angry and confused, but he'd let her go. If she'd told him she was pregnant, he would have supported her, protected her, given her anything she needed, unless she hadn't wanted his protection. Unless she'd looked at his world and decided her child was better off without it. Without him. The thought burned, but Jin-woo couldn't deny its logic. What kind of father could he be? His life was measured in bodies dropped, territories claimed, enemies eliminated. His hands were stained with blood that could never wash clean. His enemies were numerous and patient, always looking for weakness, always ready to strike at anything he cared about. Maybe Imani had been right to run. Maybe she'd been trying to protect their daughter from exactly what Jin-woo knew would come next. Because now that he knew the child existed, now that someone else knew she existed, there was no going back. She was already part of his world, whether Imani accepted that or not. His phone buzzed. Minho, already working. The message was simple. Found them, sending details within the hour. Jin-woo looked at the photograph one more time before sliding it carefully into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. The little girl was smiling in the image, her small hands gripping the swing's chains, her face full of joy and innocence. She had no idea who her father was. No idea of the blood that ran through her veins, the legacy she'd inherited, the danger that now stalked her every step. But she would learn. They both would, because Park Jin-woo had just gained something he'd never had before and could never afford to lose. A reason to care about tomorrow. The file arrived exactly 57 minutes later, a thick envelope that Minho delivered personally rather than trusting to electronic transmission. In their world, information was currency. And the most valuable currency never went digital where it could be intercepted or traced. Jin-woo opened it alone, having dismissed even Minho from his office. Some things required privacy, and learning about the life your daughter had lived without you was one of them. The first document was a birth certificate, issued in Atlanta, Georgia, 5 years and 3 months ago. Mother, Imani Jefferson. Father, blank. The child's name was Zara Jefferson. His daughter had a name, Zara. It meant princess in Hebrew, he knew that much. Fitting, though he doubted Imani had chosen it with any thought to his bloodline. The second page detailed Imani's current address in Seoul's Itaewon district, a neighborhood known for its international residents and multicultural atmosphere. She'd come back to Korea. That surprised him. She'd left so completely that he'd assumed she'd returned to America. But here she was, less than 10 kilometers from his office, raising their daughter in a modest 3-room apartment above a coffee shop. According to the surveillance photos included in the file, Imani worked as a freelance translator again, operating from home mostly, taking meetings at coffee shops when necessary. She kept to herself. No boyfriend, no suspicious contacts, no connection to any rival organizations. just a single mother trying to raise her child quietly and safely. But how had she managed to stay hidden for so long? Jinwoo flipped through more pages, finding the answer in her careful paranoia. She'd changed her name legally in the United States before returning to Korea. She'd entered on an American passport that listed her as Imani Davis, using her mother's maiden name. The apartment was rented under a different name entirely. She used cash for most purchases. She never stayed in one place long, changing coffee shops and grocery stores regularly, never establishing a pattern that could be tracked. She'd been running from him. All this time, she'd been running from him. The realization hit harder than he'd expected. Jinwoo prided himself on emotional control, on being able to compartmentalize, to separate business from personal. But this wasn't business. This was his daughter. This was the woman who'd meant something to him when nothing else had. And she'd been so afraid of him that she'd spent 5 years hiding in plain sight. More photos. Zara at a small private international school. Zara at a playground. Zara at a bookstore, her small face scrunched in concentration as she looked at picture books. In every photo, Imani was nearby, watching, protective. Never distracted, never at ease, always vigilant. She was protecting their daughter from him. Jinwoo closed the file and leaned back in his chair, letting his mind drift back to 5 years ago. To who he'd been then, to what Imani must have seen. He'd been different then. Hungrier, more violent. He'd been making his play for power, which meant eliminating anyone who stood in his way. The previous Tumok had 4 strong lieutenants, each one more than capable of challenging Jinwoo's claim. He dealt with them systematically, methodically, publicly. Each one had served as a message to the others, challenge me and die. Imani had been there for the worst of it. She'd been working in his office when Lee Dong-hyun had tried to have Jinwoo assassinated, sending 3 men with knives to his private residence. Jinwoo had killed 2 of them himself, breaking the 3rd one until he gave up Dong-hyun's location. Then Jinwoo had gone to Dong-hyun's own office and beaten him to death with his bare hands while a dozen witnesses watched. He'd come home that night covered in blood, not his own. Imani had been waiting for him because she'd called and he hadn't answered. And she'd worried. She'd taken one look at him and gone pale. He'd tried to explain, tried to minimize it, but there was no minimizing what he was, what he'd done, what he would continue to do. She'd stayed that night. She'd even helped him clean up, her hands shaking as she wiped blood from his face and asked no questions. But something had changed between them. She'd looked at him differently after that, with fear, with recognition of who and what he really was. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Now, with 5 years of perspective, Jinwoo could see it clearly. She must have already known she was pregnant. Must have taken a test, gotten confirmation, and realized she was carrying the child of a murderer. Not just any murderer, but one who was methodically slaughtering his way to the top of a crime syndicate. What choice had she had? She couldn't tell him. If she told him, he would have kept her close, protected her, made her part of his world. And that world was full of violence and blood and death. That world was no place for a child, so she'd run. She'd taken their unborn daughter and disappeared, choosing poverty and paranoia over the wealth and danger that came with being Park Jin-woo's family. He couldn't even be angry about it. Not really. Because she'd been right. The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Minho entered at his signal, his expression carefully neutral. "The photograph," Jin-woo said. "Where did it come from?" "We're still tracking that. The envelope passed through at least 3 intermediaries. Professional work. Someone who knows how to cover their trail. Rival faction? Possibly. Or someone trying to stir up trouble. The Hwaseong group has been testing our boundaries lately. This could be their way of applying pressure." Jin-woo considered that. The Hwaseong faction controlled Incheon's port district, and they'd been increasingly aggressive about expanding into Seoul proper. If they discovered his child, they might use her as leverage, or worse, as a target. "Double the security around Itaewon," Jin-woo ordered. "Discreet surveillance. I want to know if anyone unusual shows interest in that neighborhood. If anyone even looks at that coffee shop, I want to know about it." "You're going to protect them." It wasn't a question. "She's my daughter." The mother made it clear she doesn't want your protection. The mother doesn't get to decide that anymore. Jinwoo's voice was cold. Someone knows about Zara. Someone is threatening her whether Imani understands that or not. "I won't let anything happen to my child. Minho nodded, accepting the decision even if he had reservations. What about contact? Will you approach them? That was the question Jin-woo had been avoiding. Every instinct screamed at him to go there immediately, to see his daughter in person, to confirm with his own eyes that she was real, safe, healthy. But he'd learned patience in this business. Rushing in without a plan got you killed. Not yet. First, I need to know who sent that photograph and what they want. Then I need to understand what threats exist. Once I've neutralized the danger, then I'll deal with Imani. And if she refuses to let you be part of the child's life? Jin-woo's expression hardened. That's not her choice to make. Zara is my blood. In our world, that means everything. Imani can accept my protection and my involvement, or I'll take steps to ensure my daughter's safety without her cooperation. It sounded harsh, even to his own ears. But it was the truth. He'd already lost 5 years of his daughter's life. He wouldn't lose any more because Imani was too stubborn or too afraid to accept reality. The file contained one more item at the bottom. A school permission form, filled out in Imani's neat handwriting. Emergency contact, none. Medical history, standard vaccinations, no allergies. Father's information, unknown, as if he didn't exist. As if 5 years of hiding had erased him from Zara's life completely. Jin-woo traced his finger over the word unknown and made a silent promise. He might have been unknown for 5 years, but not anymore. His daughter would know her father, would know where she came from, would know that she carried the blood of the Gyeomseong faction, one of the most powerful families in Seoul's underworld. She would know him, even if he had to tear down Imani's carefully constructed world to make it happen. Imani Jefferson had learned to trust her instincts years ago. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She stood at the window of her apartment, partially hidden behind the curtain, watching the street below. It was a Tuesday evening, and Itaewon was busy as always with its mix of Korean locals, foreign residents, and military personnel from the nearby base. The coffee shop below her apartment was closing up for the night. Its owner, Mrs. Park, an elderly woman who asked no questions and accepted rent in cash, locking the doors and pulling down the security gate. Everything looked normal, but Imani had survived 5 years of hiding by recognizing when normal had a slight, almost imperceptible edge to it. The man across the street in the dark sedan had been there for 3 hours. He pretended to be on his phone, but his eyes kept drifting to her building. The woman examining produce at the corner market had passed by twice in the last hour, never actually buying anything. And there was a third person, gender indeterminate, standing in the shadows of the alley next to the convenience store, too still to be a casual smoker or drunk. They'd found her. Somehow, after 5 years of careful paranoia, of changing her name and habits and never staying in one place too long, they'd found her. Or rather, he'd found her. Behind her, Zara was playing quietly with her dolls, creating elaborate stories that Imani could only half hear. Her daughter's imagination was boundless, crafting entire worlds from plastic figures and a few cardboard boxes. She was happy, safe, innocent. She knew nothing of her father's world, nothing of the blood-soaked empire Park Jin-woo had built, nothing of the danger that came with carrying his genetics. Imani had made sure of that. "Mommy, can I have a snack?" Zara's voice pulled Imani away from the window. "Of course, baby." Imani forced a smile, moving to the small kitchen and pulling out the apple slices she'd prepared that morning. Zara accepted them with a bright smile, returning to her dolls and their epic adventures. Imani's hands shook as she put the container back in the refrigerator. She'd known this day would come eventually. You couldn't hide forever, not from someone with Park Jin-woo's resources. She'd hoped to have more time. Hoped that maybe he'd never find out. Hoped that her desperate gamble to vanish completely would protect Zara from the truth of her heritage. But hope was a luxury mothers like her couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Imani stared at it for a long moment before answering, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes?" "Ms. Jefferson, or should I call you Ms. Davis?" The voice was unfamiliar, but the threat was unmistakable. "We need to talk about your daughter." Imani's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please don't insult my intelligence. We know who you are. We know who the girl's father is. And we know you've been hiding her from him. What do you want?" "Just a conversation. Tomorrow, alone. There's a cafe 3 blocks from your apartment. Meet me there at 3 in the afternoon, or we start asking questions about you to people who might find the answers interesting." The line went dead. Imani set the phone down carefully, her mind racing. This wasn't Jinwoo's style. He would have approached directly, overwhelming her with his presence and his power. This felt like something else. Someone trying to leverage her daughter for their own purposes. She had 3 choices. She could run again, pack up everything tonight and disappear before morning. She could ignore the threat and hope they were bluffing. Or she could meet them and find out what they actually wanted. None of the options felt safe. "Mommy?" Zara was looking at her with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetie." Another lie. Imani had told so many lies over the past 5 years that she barely recognized truth anymore. "Just tired. Why don't we get ready for bed early tonight?" "But it's only 7 o'clock. "I know, but tomorrow's a school day, and I want you to be well rested." Zara pouted but didn't argue. She was a good child, easy and compliant, which made Imani's heart ache with guilt. What would happen to that sweetness if she ever learned the truth about her father? If she ever understood what ran through her veins? After Zara was tucked into bed, after the nightly routine of stories and songs and one more glass of water and one more hug, Imani sat in her small living room and faced the truth she'd been avoiding for 5 years. She couldn't run from Park Jin-woo forever. And more importantly, she wasn't sure she should. The memories she'd tried to suppress came flooding back. Jin-woo before the violence, before she'd understood what he truly was. The way he'd listened to her, really listened, as if her thoughts and opinions mattered. The way he touched her with surprising gentleness. His hands capable of tenderness despite their capacity for brutality. The way he'd looked at her sometimes, like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows and lies. She'd loved him. God help her. She'd fallen in love with a monster, and by the time she'd realized what he was, it had been too late. She'd already been carrying his child. The night everything changed played in her memory like a film she couldn't turn off. Jin-woo returning home covered in someone else's blood, the smell of it, copper and wrong, filling the apartment. His eyes empty of anything recognizable. The man she loved replaced by something cold and lethal. She'd asked if he was hurt. He'd said no. She'd asked what happened. He'd told her the truth, simple and brutal. Someone had challenged his authority, so he'd eliminated the threat. Just like that. Like taking a life was nothing more than crossing an item off a to-do list. She'd helped him clean up because she'd been in shock, moving through the motions while her brain struggled to process what she was seeing. The man she'd made love to just hours earlier was a killer. Not a soldier following orders, not someone acting in self-defense, but a calculated, methodical killer who saw violence as a tool. And she was pregnant with his child. The next 2 weeks had been torture. She couldn't tell him about the pregnancy, not after seeing what he was capable of. She couldn't stay, knowing what kind of life awaited their child. But leaving meant giving up everything, the support and protection he could provide, the wealth that would have made raising a child easier. In the end, maternal instinct had won. She'd taken what little money she'd saved, bought a plane ticket to Atlanta using her mother's maiden name, and disappeared into America's chaotic immigration system where even Jin-woo's considerable resources would struggle to find her. For 2 years, she'd lived in Georgia, working under the table, using false documents, always looking over her shoulder. When Zara was 2, Imani had made the calculated risk to return to South Korea. It was the last place Jin-woo would look for her, and she'd missed the country, the language, the culture. Plus, South Korea was safer than America in many ways, especially for a single mother trying to raise a child alone. She'd been so careful, changed her name legally in the U.S., entered Korea on a different passport, rented under yet another name. She'd created layers of protection, false identities that would require significant resources to untangle. But it hadn't been enough. Nothing was ever enough when you were hiding from Park Jin-woo. A soft knock at her door made Imani jump. She checked the peephole carefully before opening it, keeping the chain engaged. Mrs. Park stood there, holding a covered dish. "I made too much kimchi jjigae," the elderly woman said. "I thought you and the little one might like some." Imani relaxed slightly, accepting the dish with thanks. Mrs. Park had been kind to her, never prying, never asking uncomfortable questions. She was one of the few people Imani almost trusted in Seoul. "Mrs. Park," Imani said carefully, "have you noticed anyone unusual in the neighborhood lately?" The older woman's expression grew serious. There have been some men asking questions, not police. Different. They wanted to know about foreign residents, particularly Americans. I told them nothing, of course. But, child, if you're in trouble, you should know these men don't seem like the type to give up easily. Thank you for warning me. Your daughter, Mrs. Park said quietly. She's a good child. Whatever you're running from, I hope you can protect her. After Mrs. Park left, Imani stood with her back against the closed door, the weight of her choices crushing down on her. She'd thought she could protect Zara by hiding, by keeping her away from Jin Woo's world, but the world had found them anyway. And now she had to decide, continue running or face the man she'd fled from and find out what he wanted with their daughter. The decision, she realized, had already been made the moment that photograph was taken, the moment someone else learned about Zara's existence. Running wouldn't protect her daughter anymore. Only confronting the truth would. But first, she had to survive tomorrow's meeting with whoever had called her, and then, if she lived through that, she'd have to face something far more terrifying. Park Jin-woo himself. Jin-woo received the report at 9 the next morning. Someone had contacted Imani, someone who wasn't affiliated with the Gyeomsong faction, someone who'd managed to circumvent his surveillance and make direct threats. Play it back, he ordered Minho. His lieutenant pressed a button and Imani's voice filled the office, thin and frightened through the recorded phone call. Jin-woo listened to every word, his jaw clenching tighter with each sentence. The cafe is in neutral territory, Minho said when the recording ended, between our district and Hwaseong's. Whoever set this up knows the city's power structures. They're using her to get to me. Jin-woo's voice was quiet, which anyone who knew him would recognize as dangerous. They found my daughter, and instead of coming to me directly, they're threatening a civilian, a mother. Your orders? Jin-woo was silent for a moment, considering his options. He could have his men intercept the meeting, eliminate whoever showed up, and extract Imani by force. It would be efficient, decisive, and send a clear message about the cost of threatening his family. But it would also terrify Imani even more than she already was, and it would confirm every fear she had about him and his world. I'll handle it personally, Jin-woo said finally. Have the team positioned around the cafe, but nobody moves unless I give the signal. I want to know who we're dealing with before we act. Boss, if this is Hwaseong making a play for negotiating leverage, then we'll negotiate. But first, I need to understand what's really happening here. Jin-woo stood, reaching for his jacket. And I need to see Imani again. She'll be armed, you realize. A mother protecting her child from the man who terrifies her most. I know. Jin-woo's expression was grim. I'm counting on it. The cafe was one of those generic chain establishments that dotted Seoul. All clean lines and comfortable chairs, designed to be unremarkable. Perfect for a meeting you didn't want anyone to remember. Jin-woo arrived early, taking a table in the back where he could watch both the entrance and the window facing the street. His team was in position, 4 men who looked like regular customers scattered throughout the space, 2 more outside monitoring approaches. To a casual observer, nothing seemed unusual. To someone who knew what to look for, the cafe was a fortress. Imani arrived exactly at 3, and Jin-woo's breath caught despite his best efforts at control. 5 years had changed her. She was thinner, her natural hair shorter than he remembered, styled in a neat twist. Her clothes were simple but elegant, the kind of practical fashion favored by working mothers who couldn't afford to stand out. She moved carefully, eyes scanning the cafe with practiced wariness. She didn't see him, not yet. She was too focused on finding whoever had called her, her attention directed toward a man sitting alone near the window. Jin-woo recognized him immediately. Choi Jae-sung, one of Hwaseong faction's younger enforcers. Ambitious, ruthless, and stupid enough to think he could leverage a child without consequences. He watched Imani approach Choi's table, watched her sit down with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Even afraid, she carried herself with dignity. Pride. She'd always had that strength, that refusal to be diminished by circumstance. Ms. Jefferson. Choi's voice carried across the quiet cafe. Thank you for coming. What do you want? Imani's voice was steady, but Jin-woo heard the tremor underneath. Information primarily, and leverage, secondarily. You see, we've discovered something interesting about Park Jin-woo. The great Tumuk of Gyeomsong, the man who claims to have no weaknesses, actually has a daughter. A child he doesn't even know exists. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, we have photographs, we have birth records, immigration documents, everything we need. The question is, what do we do with that information? Do we tell Jin Woo about his daughter? Do we tell our own boss and let Hua Xiong use her as leverage? Or do we make a different arrangement entirely? Jin Woo saw Imani's hand grip the edge of the table. Different arrangement? You deliver a message to Jin Woo. Tell him that we have certain information that could prove embarrassing or dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. Tell him that for a reasonable price, we're willing to keep that information private. You're trying to blackmail him using my daughter. Our daughter, technically. But yes, that's the general idea. That was when Jin Woo stood up and crossed the cafe in 3 strides. He didn't announce himself. He simply appeared beside Choi's table, his presence like a blade drawn in a peaceful room. Choi Jae-sung, Jin Woo's voice was pleasant, conversational. I don't believe we've been formally introduced, though I recognize your face from security footage of that warehouse incident in Incheon last month, the one where you thought you were clever. Choi went pale, starting to rise from his seat. Jin Woo's hand landed on his shoulder, pushing him back down with just enough force to be a threat. Stay, we're not finished talking. Imani had frozen, her eyes wide as she stared at Jin Woo. He wanted to look at her, to acknowledge the 5 years of separation, to say everything that had been building in his chest since he'd seen her photograph. But right now, she needed to see him as what he was. Dangerous enough to keep her and their daughter safe. Boss, Choi started. You approached my daughter's mother with threats. You thought you could blackmail me using my child. You made several assumptions, all of them catastrophically wrong. Jin Woo's smile was cold. Would you like to know what mistakes you made? Choi didn't answer. First, you assumed I didn't already know about my daughter. Wrong. I've known for 2 days. Second, you assumed you were the only one looking for leverage. Also wrong. Third, and most fatally, you assumed this was about money or territory or the usual games we play. Jin Woo leaned in close. This is about my blood, my family. And in our world, that makes it sacred. He straightened, his hand still on Choi's shoulder. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this cafe and deliver a message to whoever put you up to this, whether that's your boss or some other faction trying to stir up trouble. Tell them Park Jin-woo's daughter is under his protection now. Anyone who approaches her, threatens her, or even looks at her wrong will answer to me personally. Understood? Yes, boss. And Choi, if I ever see you within a kilometer of this woman or her child again, they'll never find your body. Now leave. Choi practically ran from the cafe, leaving Jin Woo alone with Imani for the first time in 5 years. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. How long have you known? 2 days. Someone sent me a photograph. He pulled it from his jacket, placing it on the table between them. The image of her pushing Zara on the swing. Beautiful picture. Our daughter looks happy. Stay away from her. That's not possible anymore. Too many people know now. The only thing protecting Zara is my name and my reputation. Without that, she's a target for anyone who wants to hurt me. This is exactly why I left. Imani's voice rose, drawing glances from other patrons. She lowered it, but the fury remained. This world, this violence, these threats. I won't let her grow up in it. I won't let her become part of what you are. She already is part of what I am. She has my blood, my features, my genetics. You can't change that by hiding her. I can raise her to be different, to be better, to choose a different path than you did. Jin Woo studied her face, seeing the desperation and determination there. 5 years of running, 5 years of paranoia, 5 years of choosing poverty over his wealth, fear over his protection, all to keep their daughter away from his world. And he understood. God help him. He understood her completely. I'm not asking you to bring her into my world, Jin Woo said quietly. I'm telling you that world has already found her, that man who just left. He's nothing. Low-level enforcer trying to make a name for himself. But his attempt means the information is spreading. Soon everyone will know that Park Jin-woo has a daughter, and then the real threats will come. So what do you want? I want to protect my child. I want to make sure she grows up safe and healthy. I want to be part of her life, even if that has to be from a distance. He paused. And I want you to stop running, because running won't save her anymore. Only standing with me will. Standing with you means accepting everything you are, everything you do. Yes, it does. Jinwoo wouldn't lie to her, wouldn't minimize the truth. I'm not a good man, Imani. I've killed people. I'll kill more before this is over. My hands will never be clean, but they're strong enough to keep our daughter safe. Can you say the same? The question hung between them, brutal and honest. Imani's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I hate you, she whispered. I hate what you are. I hate that our daughter carries your blood. I hate that you're right about everything you just said. I know. But if you think I'm going to just let you waltz into Zara's life and pretend to be some kind of father, you're insane. You can protect her from a distance. You can make sure your enemies know she's off limits. But you stay away from her. You don't contact her. You don't try to meet her. You remain a stranger. Jinwoo wanted to argue, wanted to demand his rights as a father, wanted to tell her that he'd already lost 5 years and wouldn't lose another day. But he saw the steel in Imani's eyes and knew this was not a negotiation he could win through force. Not yet, anyway. For now, he agreed. But Imani, this isn't over. That's my daughter. Eventually, she'll have questions about her father. And when she does, I'll be there to answer them. He left her at the table, returning to the life he'd built and the empire he defended. But everything had changed. He had a daughter now. A daughter who didn't know him, who was being raised to believe he didn't exist or didn't care. He would prove her mother wrong. He would find a way to be part of Zara's life, even if he had to tear down every obstacle Imani put in his way. Because Park Jinwoo was many things, but he'd never been a man who accepted defeat. And he'd never wanted anything as much as he wanted to know his daughter. The first serious threat came exactly 1 week after the cafe meeting. Not from Hwaseong faction, which had been unusually quiet since Choi Jae-sung's embarrassing failure. Not from any of the usual rivals who tested Gyeomseong's boundaries. The real danger came from somewhere Jinwoo hadn't anticipated. His own organization. The faction council met monthly in a private room at one of Jinwoo's legitimate businesses. A high-end restaurant in Gangnam that served as neutral ground for internal disputes. The council consisted of 5 men, each controlling a different aspect of Gyeomseong's operations. Smuggling, protection, entertainment, real estate, and enforcement. They were Jinwoo's most trusted lieutenants, promoted through years of loyalty and proven capability, or so he'd thought. We need to discuss the child. Park Sang-hoon, who ran the protection rackets, spoke first. He was 60 years old, a veteran of the old wars, scarred and calculating. Word has spread throughout the organization. The men are asking questions. Jinwoo sat at the head of the table, Minho at his right hand. What kind of questions? About succession, about legitimacy, about weakness. Sang-hoon's voice was careful, but the challenge was implicit. You've always presented yourself as a man without attachments. No family. No vulnerabilities. Now suddenly there's a daughter nobody knew about. My personal life is not the council's concern. It becomes our concern when it affects the organization's stability. This from Lee Chung-min, the entertainment division head. Younger than Sang-hoon, but equally ambitious. Every boss in Seoul now knows you have a weak point. A 5-year-old weak point who lives in Itaewon with minimal security. She has my protection. Your protection is exactly what worries us. How much of our resources are you diverting to protect this child? How many men are watching her instead of watching our territories? How long before our enemies realize they can hurt you by hurting her? Jinwoo's expression didn't change, but Minho tensed beside him, recognizing the danger in the room. This wasn't just concern for the organization. This was a challenge to Jinwoo's leadership. The child is under my protection, Jinwoo repeated, his voice dropping to that quiet register that meant violence was close. Anyone who questions that is questioning me. Do we have a problem, Changmin? We have a situation that requires careful handling. I'm suggesting we take steps to neutralize the threat. What kind of steps? Changmin leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. The mother is the weak link. She has no protection, no status, no connection to any powerful family. If she were to have an accident, if she were to disappear, the child would become a ward of the state. Untraceable, unconnected to you. The perfect solution. The room went silent. Jinwoo stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. He walked around the table until he stood behind Changmin's chair. You just suggested killing the mother of my child, Jinwoo said conversationally. The woman who kept my daughter safe for 5 years. The woman who, despite fearing me and my world, has raised a healthy, happy child. You suggested murdering her. I suggested solving a problem. Jinwoo's hand shot out, grabbing Changmin by the hair and slamming his face into the table. Once, twice. The crack of bone on wood echoed through the room. When Jinwoo released him, Changmin's nose was broken, blood streaming down his face. Anyone else want to suggest solutions? Jinwoo looked around the table. Anyone else think my daughter is a problem that needs to be solved? Sang-hoon shook his head. The other council members avoided Jinwoo's gaze entirely. Good. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Zara is my daughter. She is Gumseong's heir, whether any of you like it or not. And Imani, her mother, is under my protection. Anyone who threatens either of them threatens me. Anyone who touches them dies. No exceptions, no mercy, no negotiation. He returned to his seat, his breathing perfectly even despite the violence. Minho, make sure everyone in the organization understands this. The child and her mother are sacred. Spread the word to every faction in Seoul. Let them know that Park Jin-woo has declared them untouchable. Yes, boss. And Changmin? You have until the end of this week to prove your loyalty or leave the organization. I suggest you choose wisely. The meeting ended shortly after, the council members filing out with new understanding of exactly how serious Jin-woo was about his daughter, all except Minho, who remained seated. That was risky, his lieutenant said quietly. Changmin has followers, men who might see this as weakness. Then they can test that theory and die. I'm not hiding my daughter anymore. She's my family, and everyone needs to understand what that means. What about the mother? Will you bring her into our protection formally? Jinwoo considered that. Imani had been clear about her terms. She wanted him to stay away, to protect from a distance. But distance hadn't stopped Changmin from suggesting murder. Distance wouldn't stop others from making the same calculation. Increase surveillance. I want to know about every person who comes within 50 meters of that apartment. But don't approach Imani yet. She needs to realize on her own that refusing my direct protection is dangerous. And if she doesn't realize it before someone makes a move, then I'll deal with the threat and make her understand. One way or another, she's going to accept my help. But as it turned out, the threat came faster than even Jinwoo had anticipated. The attack happened 3 days later on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Zara was at school, Imani was working from a coffee shop nearby, and everything seemed normal. Too normal, as Jinwoo's surveillance team would later realize. The call came to Jinwoo at 4:15. Minho's voice was tight with urgency. The school. Someone's taken the girl. Jinwoo's world narrowed to a single point of absolute clarity. Details. 2 men, not Korean. Eastern European, possibly Russian. They waited until dismissal, grabbed her during the confusion of pickup. Clean extraction. Professional. Where's Imani? Still at the coffee shop. We haven't told her yet. Get her to my office. Use force if necessary, and mobilize every man we have. I want those Russians found within the hour. Jinwoo was already moving, grabbing his jacket and the handgun he kept in his desk. Kidnapping a child was a death sentence in Seoul's underworld. There were rules, lines that even the most ruthless bosses didn't cross. Children were sacred. Families were sacred. Someone had just declared war. By the time Imani arrived at his office, practically dragged there by 2 of Jinwoo's men, he had the first pieces of information. The kidnappers were Russian mob, new arrivals in Seoul with connections to international trafficking networks. They weren't after ransom. They were after leverage. Specifically, they wanted Jinwoo to facilitate a major smuggling operation through Incheon's port. In exchange, they'd return his daughter unharmed. Imani burst through his office door, her face a mask of terror. Where is she? Where's Zara? Sit down. Don't you dare tell me to sit down. Where is my daughter? Jinwoo crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. Imani, look at me. I will get her back, but I need you to stay calm and let me work. They took her because of you, because of what you are. I told you this would happen. I told you. Yes, you did, and now we're going to fix it. He guided her to a chair, his grip firm but gentle. Tell me everything about her day. Any unusual activity at school? Anyone paying attention to her? Imani's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. There was a man at pickup yesterday, foreign. He asked one of the other mothers about Zara. She told me about it, but I thought it was just curiosity because Zara's obviously mixed race. Did this mother get a good look at him? She said he was tall, blonde, accent she couldn't place. Jinwoo relayed that to Minho, who was coordinating the search. Russian mob operatives in Seoul stood out, especially in Itaewon where most foreigners were American military or English teachers. They'd be found. The question was what condition Zara would be in when they found her. I should never have come back to Korea, Imani whispered. I should have stayed in America. I should have run farther. They would have found her anywhere. I have enemies in every country. The only difference is here, I have the resources to get her back. And what happens after you get her back? We just go back to hiding? Waiting for the next threat? Jinwoo knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. They were cold, trembling. No. After this, you accept my protection. Real protection. You and Zara move somewhere secure. You let me assign guards. You stop pretending you can keep her safe alone. I don't want that life for her. Neither do I, but it's the life she has. She's my daughter, Imani. That means she inherits everything I've built and everything I've destroyed. She inherits my enemies and my power. You can't change that by wishing it away. Imani's tears finally fell, silent and devastating. She's just a baby. She doesn't understand any of this. I know, but she will. And when she's old enough, I'll make sure she has choices I never had. For now, though, we have to keep her alive long enough to make those choices. His phone buzzed. Minho with an update. They'd found the Russians' location. An abandoned warehouse in Incheon, exactly where Jinwoo would have expected them to hide. Stay here, Jinwoo told Imani, releasing her hands and standing. I'm bringing her back. Let me come with you. No. This is going to be violent and ugly, and I won't have you see that. When I return with Zara, you can hold her and cry and tell her everything's fine. But right now, you need to let me be what I am. He left before she could argue, Minho and 6 of his best men following. They took 3 cars, armed with enough weapons to start a small war. Because that's what this was. War declared against Park Jin-woo's family. The Russians would learn what that meant. They'd learn it painfully, publicly, and permanently. And when it was over, when his daughter was safe and his enemies were dead, Jin-woo would make sure every faction in Seoul understood the same lesson. You don't touch Park Jin-woo's blood, not his daughter, not her mother, not anyone he claimed as family. Touch them, and you didn't just make an enemy. You made a death wish. The warehouse district in Incheon was a maze of corrugated metal and concrete, every building looking identical in the dim evening light. Ships' horns echoed from the nearby port, and the smell of salt water mixed with industrial chemicals hung heavy in the air. Perfect place for a kidnapping, Jin-woo thought coldly. Plenty of cover, plenty of exits, far from civilian eyes. The Russians had chosen well, but they'd underestimated how quickly Gyeongsang could mobilize in its own territory. Minho's intelligence team had narrowed the location to 3 possible warehouses. Jin-woo split his forces, sending 2 groups to the alternate locations, while he and Minho approached the most likely target. They moved in darkness, using hand signals instead of voices, each man knowing his role without needing instruction. This was what Gyeongsang did best. Violence, swift and overwhelming. Jin-woo's phone vibrated once. The signal from the other teams, negative contacts at their locations, which meant he'd been right. Zara was here. He could feel it, actually. A pull in his chest that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with blood. His daughter was somewhere in that building, frightened and alone, and every second that passed was another second of terror for her. The rage that filled him was cold and calculated. Jin-woo had learned years ago that hot anger made you stupid. Cold anger made you efficient. They entered through a side door that Minho's lock specialist opened in under 30 seconds. The warehouse's interior was vast and mostly empty. Abandoned shipping containers stacked haphazardly, creating corridors and blind corners. Somewhere in this labyrinth, the Russians were holding his daughter. Jin-woo moved through the shadows like he'd been born to them, his handgun held low and ready. Behind him, his men fanned out in practiced formation. They'd done this before, cleared buildings full of hostile forces, extracted targets from impossible positions. This was just another operation. Except it wasn't, because this time, the target was his daughter. The first Russian appeared around a corner, cigarette dangling from his lips, clearly on patrol. Jinwoo put 2 rounds through his chest before the man could even reach for his weapon. The suppressed gunshots were barely louder than coughs. "Contact," Minho whispered into his radio. "Southwest corner, moving to objective." More Russians emerged from the containers, and suddenly the warehouse erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed off metal walls, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness in strobe light bursts. Jinwoo moved through it all with deadly purpose, his training and experience turning combat into choreography. He shot a man in the knee, then the throat as he fell, kicked another's weapon away, and put his gun to the Russian's head. "Where's the girl?" The Russian spat at him. Jinwoo pulled the trigger and moved on. 3 more went down to his team's coordinated fire. One tried to run and made it 10 feet before Minho's shot dropped him. The gunfight lasted less than 3 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the smoke cleared, 7 Russians lay dead or dying. 1 remained, his hands raised in surrender, blood streaming from a shoulder wound. "The child," Jinwoo said, his voice perfectly calm despite the violence. "Where?" "Northeast container, blue one, locked from outside." The Russian's accent was thick but understandable. "She's alive, unharmed. We were told not to hurt her." "Who told you that?" "The one who hired us. Korean man. Older, scarred face." Park Sang-hoon, the council member who'd been silent during Chung Min's suggestion to eliminate Imani. Silent because he'd already made his own plans. Jinwoo shot the Russian between the eyes and ran toward the northeast section of the warehouse. The blue container was easy to spot, a large padlock securing its double doors. He didn't bother with picking it. He simply shot the lock off and wrenched the doors open. Zara sat in the far corner of the container, her small body pressed against the metal wall. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wide with terror. She wore her school uniform, now dirty and wrinkled, and her small hands clutched a worn stuffed rabbit that Jinwoo recognized from surveillance photos. For a moment, father and daughter simply stared at each other. She looked so much like him. The same eyes, the same facial structure, but she was small and fragile and terrified. And the rage that had driven him here transformed into something else. Something fiercer and more primal. This was his daughter, his blood, his responsibility. "Zara?" He kept his voice soft, approaching slowly. "My name is Jinwoo. I'm here to take you back to your mommy." She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him with those eyes that mirrored his own. "I know you're scared, but you're safe now. No one's gonna hurt you, I promise." "You're bleeding." Her voice was tiny, barely audible. She was looking at his arm where a bullet had grazed him during the firefight. He hadn't even felt it. "It's just a scratch. I'm okay. Are you hurt anywhere?" She shook her head slowly. "Good. That's very good." Jinwoo holstered his weapon and knelt down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Your mom is very worried about you. She's waiting for you at my office. Would you like me to take you to her?" Zara considered this, her young mind trying to process trauma and fear and this strange man who looked like her. Finally, she nodded. "Can you walk, or do you want me to carry you?" She hesitated, then held out her arms. Jinwoo lifted her carefully, supporting her small weight like she was made of glass. She buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her small body shake with suppressed sobs. "It's okay," he murmured, walking out of the container. "You're safe now. I've got you." Minho appeared at his side, his weapon still drawn, his face grim. "The building's clear, all hostiles neutralized. But boss, we need to move. Someone will have heard the gunfire." Jinwoo nodded, adjusting Zara's weight. She'd wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging to him with the desperate strength of a frightened child. Something in his chest cracked open, and he understood for the first time what Imani must have felt every day for the past 5 years. This overwhelming, terrifying need to protect something small and innocent from a world that wanted to destroy it. They made it back to the cars without incident. Jinwoo climbed into the back seat, still holding Zara, and she refused to let go even when he tried to buckle her in. Finally, he just held her against his chest and told the driver to move. The ride back to Seoul was silent except for Zara's occasional hiccuping sobs. Jinwoo found himself murmuring to her nonsense words of comfort, promises that everything would be okay. He didn't know if she understood Korean fully or if English was her primary language at home, but his tone seemed to calm her. By the time they reached his office building, she'd fallen asleep against him, exhausted by fear and tears. Jinwoo carried her inside, his men clearing the way, everyone staring at their boss holding a small child with blood on both their clothes. Imani met them in the hallway outside his office. She saw Zara and let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a prayer. Jinwoo carefully transferred the sleeping child to her mother's arms, and Imani sank to the floor, holding her daughter and rocking her and crying. "She's okay," Jinwoo said quietly, scared but unhurt. "The men who took her are dead." Imani looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. "All of them?" "All of them. And the man who hired them will be dealt with by morning." "Thank you." The words seemed to pain her, but she said them anyway. "Thank you for bringing her back." Jinwoo crouched beside them, his hand reaching out to touch Zara's hair. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "We need to talk, Imani. About what happens next, because this was just the beginning." "I know." Imani's voice was hollow. "I know we can't hide anymore. I know she needs more protection than I can give her. I have a place, secure compound in Gangnam, top floor of a building I own, with guards and security systems and everything you need. You and Zara can live there. I'll make sure you have everything, that Zara can still go to school, that your life feels as normal as possible given the circumstances. And you? I'll be there sometimes. Not all the time. I have business to run, but I want to know my daughter. I want to be part of her life. I want her to know who her father is." Imani looked down at Zara's sleeping face. "She's going to ask questions now, about who you are, about why those men took her. She's smart, Jinwoo. She'll figure it out. Then we tell her age-appropriate truth. I'm her father. I work in security. There are bad people who tried to hurt her, but I stopped them. When she's older, we can explain more. But for now, that's enough." Security. Imani almost laughed. That's one way to describe organized crime. "I prefer alternative business solutions, but security works too." Despite everything, despite the tears and fear and violence, Imani smiled slightly. "You haven't changed. Neither have you. Still trying to protect everyone. Still carrying the weight of the world alone." Jinwoo stood, offering her his hand. "Let me help carry it now. You don't have to do this by yourself anymore." Imani took his hand, letting him pull her and Zara up. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you, or that I accept what you are. I know, but you're accepting my protection. That's enough, for now." He led them to a private elevator that went directly to the building's top floor. The penthouse was spacious and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Seoul's glittering skyline. It had been Jinwoo's private refuge, the one place in the city where he could escape the demands of running a criminal empire. Now it would be his daughter's home. "There are 3 bedrooms," he explained, showing Imani around. "This one has the best morning light. I thought Zara might like it. And this one is close, so you can hear her if she wakes up at night. Where do you sleep?" "The master suite on the other side of the apartment, far enough to give you privacy, close enough to respond if there's a threat." Imani carried Zara into the bedroom Jinwoo had indicated, laying her gently on the bed and removing her dirty school shoes. She pulled a blanket over her daughter and just stood there, watching her sleep. "I really did think I could protect her alone," Imani said quietly. "I thought if I just stayed hidden enough, careful enough, your world would never touch her. You did protect her. For 5 years, you kept her safe and happy and innocent. That's more than most people in my world can claim. But it wasn't enough. It was enough to get us to today, to this moment where we can protect her together. That has to count for something." Imani turned to face him, her expression weary but resolved. "What happened to the man who ordered the kidnapping?" "Park Sang-hoon, one of my council members. He'll be dead by morning." "Just like that?" "Just like that. He threatened my family. There's no negotiation, no second chances. He dies, and his death serves as a message to anyone else who might consider my daughter a useful target." "And you don't feel anything about it? About killing someone who worked for you?" Jinwoo considered the question honestly. "I feel disappointed. Sang-hoon was loyal for 20 years. But loyalty has limits apparently, and he reached his. If I let it slide, if I show mercy, others will see weakness. They'll test that weakness. More threats will come. The only way to keep Zara safe is to make examples of those who threaten her. That's not a life. That's a war. It's been a war since I was born into this world. The only difference now is I have something worth fighting for beyond power and territory. I have a daughter. He moved to stand beside her, both of them watching Zara sleep. You made choices based on what you thought was best for her. So did I, by staying away when you asked. Now we make new choices. Together. For her sake. Imani was silent for a long moment. She's going to grow up knowing her father kills people. Yes, but she'll also grow up knowing her father would kill for her, would die for her. Would tear apart the entire city if it meant keeping her safe? Is that really worse than growing up believing her father didn't care enough to be part of her life? I don't know. Imani's voice broke. I don't know anything anymore except that I'm so tired of being afraid. Jinwoo did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He pulled Imani into his arms, holding her while she cried for the second time that day. She stiffened initially, then surrendered to the comfort, her face pressed against his chest, her tears soaking into his blood-stained shirt. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he promised. I've got this. I've got both of you. Let me carry this burden now. And for the first time since leaving America 5 years ago, Imani let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face the world alone. Park Song-hoon died exactly as Jinwoo had promised, before morning. The execution was public by underworld standards, attended by every faction boss in Seoul. Minho delivered the killing blow personally, a single bullet to the back of the head while Song-hoon knelt in an empty warehouse. No ceremony, no speeches, just justice, swift and final. But eliminating Sang-hoon didn't eliminate the problem he represented. Word had spread through Seoul's criminal networks like wildfire. Park Jin-woo had a weakness. A 5-year-old weakness with big eyes and her mother's smile. The next 3 months tested everything Jin-woo had built. 2 rival factions attempted kidnappings, both thwarted by Jin-woo's upgraded security. A corrupt prosecutor tried to leverage Zara's existence to pressure Jin-woo into expanding his bribes. 3 of Jin-woo's own men betrayed him, feeding information to Hwaseong faction about his daily routines and vulnerabilities. Each threat was met with overwhelming force. Each betrayal was punished publicly, and slowly, painfully, the message got through. Park Jin-woo's family was untouchable. The price of threatening them was death, certain and without mercy. But the cost of that protection was high. Imani watched it unfold from the safety of the penthouse, trapped in luxury but unable to leave without armed escorts. She watched Jin-woo transform from the man she'd known 5 years ago into something harder, colder, more ruthless. Every threat to Zara pushed him further into the darkness of his world. And Zara, caught in the middle, began to change too. She'd adjusted to her new life with the resilience of childhood, accepting Jin-woo's presence with surprising ease. He was careful with her, gentle in ways his men had never seen their boss be gentle. He read her stories at bedtime, listened to her endless questions, taught her basic Korean phrases mixed with English. But she was smart, too smart for comfortable lies. She noticed the guards at every door. She heard the whispered conversations about threats and enemies. She saw the way her mother flinched every time Jin-woo's phone rang. One night, 6 months after moving into the penthouse, Zara appeared in Jin-woo's office while he was reviewing security reports. It was late, past midnight, and she should have been asleep. Can't sleep? Jin-woo asked, setting aside his work. I had a nightmare. Zara climbed into his lap, something she'd started doing regularly, her small body fitting perfectly against his chest. About the bad men who took me. Those men can't hurt you anymore. I made sure of it. I know. But there are always more bad men, aren't there? Mama says so. Jinwoo felt his jaw tighten. Your mama worries too much. She cries at night. I hear her. Zara looked up at him with those eyes that were so much like his own. Is it because of you? The question was innocent, but it cut deeper than any knife. Sometimes protecting people means making hard choices. Your mama doesn't always agree with my choices. Do you hurt people? There it was. The question Jin-woo had known would come eventually but had hoped to delay until Zara was older, better able to understand complexity and moral ambiguity. Yes, he answered honestly. I hurt people who try to hurt my family. I hurt people who break the rules of my world. Sometimes I hurt people just to make sure others know not to test me. So, you're a bad man? That depends on who you ask. Your mama thinks I am. Other people think I'm a necessary evil. I think I'm just someone trying to protect what's mine. Zara considered this, her young mind processing information most children never had to face. I don't think you're bad. You saved me. You read me stories. You make Mama smile sometimes, even when she doesn't want to. Your mama's very strong. She spent 5 years protecting you all by herself. That takes courage. She's scared, though, all the time. I can tell. Fear is smart when the danger is real. Your mama's fear kept you safe before I found you. Now my strength keeps you safe. Together, we're enough. Zara hugged him tighter. Promise you won't let anything happen to Mama? I promise. Nothing will hurt either of you while I'm alive. And when you're not alive anymore? Children had a brutal honesty about mortality that adults learned to avoid. Jinwoo stroked her hair, thinking about succession and legacy and all the ways his violent life could end. When I'm not alive anymore, you'll be grown up, strong and smart like your mama, and you'll have people around you who are loyal to our family. You'll never be alone, Zara. I'm making sure of that. She fell asleep in his arms eventually, her breathing evening out, her small body relaxed against his. Jinwoo carried her back to her bedroom, tucking her in and watching her sleep for a long moment. This was what he'd never expected to feel. Love. Pure, unconditional, terrifying love for someone so small and fragile. It changed everything. His priorities, his risks, his calculations. Every decision now had to be filtered through the question, how does this affect Zara? She asked you, didn't she? Imani's voice came from the doorway. About what you do. Yes. What did you tell her? The truth. Age-appropriate, but honest. She's going to live in this world whether we like it or not. Better she understands it from someone who loves her. Imani entered the room, standing on the opposite side of Zara's bed. I'm failing her as a mother. I should be able to give her a normal childhood, away from all this. You're giving her the childhood she has, not the one you wished you could give her. That's all anyone can do. But is it enough? Will she grow up resenting us? Resenting you for being what you are, or me for not protecting her from it? Maybe. Probably. But she'll also grow up knowing she was loved fiercely by both parents. That we fought for her, protected her, put her safety above everything else. That counts for something. Imani looked at him across their sleeping daughter. I don't hate you anymore. I thought I could. I wanted to. But watching you with her, seeing how much you care, how hard you work to keep her safe, I can't hate someone who loves our daughter that much. But you don't forgive me either? No, because I still see what you are. I see the blood on your hands, the violence that follows you, the bodies piling up in your wake. I see it all, and I know that's what our daughter's legacy will be. Then help me make it better. Help me build something that Zara can be proud of. I can't change what I am, but I can change what I build. For her. How? Jinwoo had been thinking about that question for months. I've been consolidating power, eliminating the most violent elements of our operations, moving money into legitimate businesses. In 10 years, maybe 15, Gumsong can be legal. Completely legal. Zara won't inherit a crime empire. She'll inherit a legitimate business empire built on a foundation of controlled violence? Yes, but cleaned up enough that she can choose a different path. You'd do that? Give up the power? For her? I'd give up everything. Jinwoo looked at Zara's sleeping face. She's the only thing I've ever had worth more than power. The only thing I'd trade it all for. Imani was quiet for a long moment. Then we do it together. We build something better, for her sake. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. But it was partnership, and that was more than Jinwoo had hoped for. The transition took 3 years. 3 years of careful maneuvering, of buying out violent operations and replacing them with legitimate businesses. 3 years of eliminating rivals who wouldn't cooperate with the new direction. 3 years of rebuilding Gyeomsong into something that looked like a business conglomerate from the outside. Even if its foundations remained soaked in blood. Zara was 8 years old when Jinwoo finally explained to her what he really did for a living. They sat in his office, father and daughter, and he laid it out honestly. The crime, the violence, the empire built on fear and loyalty and ruthless efficiency. You're a gangster, Zara said, the Korean word coming easily now after years of bilingual upbringing. Yes, but I'm transitioning into something else, something legal, so that when you're grown, you can choose your own path. You can be a doctor or a teacher or a businesswoman or anything you want. The empire will provide for you, but it won't define you. What if I want to be like you? The question stopped Jinwoo cold. Like me? Strong, powerful, someone people respect, someone who protects their family. Zara's eyes, so much like his own, met his steadily. That's not bad, is it? No, that's not bad, but you can be all those things without the blood, without the violence. That's what I'm trying to build. A foundation strong enough that you can stand on it without drowning in what it took to create it. Mama says you're trying to give me choices you never had. Your mom is very smart. She also says you're doing this because you love me more than anything. That's true, too. Zara climbed into his lap, still small enough to fit even though she was growing fast. I love you too, Appa, even though you're a gangster, even though Mama's still scared sometimes. I know you're trying to be better. For me. Jinwoo held his daughter and felt something he'd never felt before. Hope. Not for himself, but for her. For the life she could have. For the choices she'd be able to make. He'd started this journey as Park Jinwoo, crime boss, a man made of violence and ambition. He'd end it as something else, something better. Because that's what fathers did. They built better worlds for their children, no matter the cost to themselves. And if redemption was possible for someone like him, it would come from this. A small girl who saw past his blood-stained hands to the heart of a man who loved her more than power, more than control, more than his own life. 15 years after that photograph arrived on his desk, Park Jinwoo sat in the same office, now legitimately registered as CEO of Gyumsong Holdings, a conglomerate controlling real estate, entertainment, technology, and security firms across South Korea and extending into Japan and Southeast Asia. The transformation had been complete, at least on paper. Most people who dealt with Gyumsong now had no idea of its criminal origins. They saw a successful Korean businessman, wealthy and influential, with all the proper licenses and government approval. But Jinwoo knew the truth. The foundation remained blood-soaked. He'd simply built over it, layer upon layer of legitimate business until the origin was buried deep enough to forget. Almost. The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Zara entered, now 20 years old, fresh from her third year at Seoul National University, where she studied international business and law. She'd grown into a striking young woman, carrying both his features and her mother's warmth. Her natural hair styled in neat box braids, her dark suit professional and elegant. You wanted to see me, Appa? Sit. We need to discuss your future. Zara took the chair across from his desk, the same chair where Imani had sat 15 years ago, terrified and defiant. His daughter showed neither emotion. She'd grown up in this world, understanding its rules and dangers. Fear and defiance had been replaced with calculated confidence. I'm going to step down as CEO in 5 years, Jinwoo said without preamble. The board will need new leadership. I'm recommending you. I'm 20. I haven't even graduated yet. You'll be 25 when I step down. You'll have your degrees, your training, and most importantly, you'll have the loyalty of everyone who matters. You're my heir, Zara. This was always the plan. Does Mama know? Your mother and I discussed it last night. She's not happy about it, but she understands. This is your choice. You can walk away, build your own life separate from Gyumsong, or you can take what I've built and make it into something even better. Zara stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Seoul. You've spent 15 years trying to clean up our family's reputation, trying to give me options, but we both know what Gyumsong really is, what you really are, what I really am. And what's that? Survivors, people who do what's necessary to protect what's ours. You taught me that, Appa. Every day, in every decision, in every threat you eliminated before it could touch us. You taught me that power isn't evil. It's how you use it that matters. Jinwoo felt pride swell in his chest. So you'll take it? The company? On one condition. Name it? Zara turned from the window and Jinwoo saw himself reflected in her determined expression. I do it my way. No more violence. No more settling disputes with bodies. We transition completely to legitimate operations, even if it means losing some of the old guard who won't adapt. I want Gyeomsong to be clean. Actually clean, not just surface clean. That will make us vulnerable. Some of our rivals won't respect purely legal operations. Then we'll be creative. Use the law, use public pressure, use economic leverage. There are ways to destroy enemies without pulling triggers. You've already started doing it. I'm just finishing what you began. Jin-woo studied his daughter, seeing not just her mother's influence but her own unique strength. She'd taken the best of both parents and forged something new, something better. I agree to your terms. Build it however you want. Make Gyeomsong into something worthy of your vision. Thank you, Appa. Zara moved to leave, then paused at the door. You know, Mama was right to run when she did. You were a different person back then, scarier, more dangerous. I know. But you changed. You became someone worth knowing, someone I'm proud to call my father. That matters more than anything you built or destroyed. After she left, Jin-woo sat alone with his thoughts. The photograph was still there, in his desk drawer, yellowed with age. The image of Imani and Zara at the playground, frozen in a moment of innocence before his world had crashed into theirs. He'd fought so hard to earn the right to be in that photograph, to be part of their lives, to protect them from a world that wanted to consume them. And somehow, miraculously, he'd succeeded. Not perfectly, not without cost, but succeeded nonetheless. Imani entered his office without knocking, something only she could get away with. They'd never married, never even officially reconciled, but they'd built a partnership around their daughter that had evolved into something resembling love, or at least deep, abiding respect. She told me, Imani said, about taking over, and I'm terrified, but I'm also proud. She's going to do what neither of us could, actually leave the violence behind completely. She's stronger than both of us. She had to be. She's our daughter. Imani sat on the edge of his desk, a gesture of intimacy that had taken years to develop. Do you think she'll resent us for the childhood we gave her? Maybe sometimes, but I think mostly she'll understand. We did the best we could with what we had. We protected her, loved her, gave her choices. That's more than most parents in our world can say. We survived. More than that, we built something good out of something terrible. That photograph that started all this, it was meant as a threat. Someone wanted to destroy me by revealing my weakness. Instead, they gave me the greatest gift of my life. Imani looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd told you about the pregnancy? If I'd trusted you instead of running? Every day. But I understand why you didn't. I was a different man then. More monster than human. You saved Zara by keeping her from me until I could become someone worthy of being her father. You would have found a way. Even back then, you had the capacity for this, for love, for change. I just didn't see it yet. Maybe, but I'm glad you ran. Glad you gave me the chance to earn this. Nothing worth having comes easy. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Seoul's skyline light up as evening fell. Somewhere in this city, their daughter was planning her future, building on the foundation they'd created, making something clean and legitimate from blood-soaked origins. It was redemption. Not for Jin-woo's sins, but through his daughter's transformation of his empire. And if that wasn't love, if that wasn't the ultimate expression of a father's devotion, Jin-woo didn't know what was. He'd spent 20 years building power through violence. He'd spend the rest of his life building legacy through love. And in the end, love would prove more powerful than any weapon he'd ever wielded. Because Park Jin-woo had discovered something that changed everything. The most dangerous thing in the world wasn't a criminal empire or a man without fear. It was a father protecting his daughter. And nothing, not rival factions or corrupt officials or even his own dark past could stand against that. His daughter was safe. His legacy was secure. And the little girl from that photograph had grown into a woman capable of transforming his blood-soaked empire into something worthy of pride. That was redemption. That was victory. That was everything. If you enjoyed this story of a Korean mafia boss discovering his secret daughter and the fierce mother protecting her, make sure to like this video and subscribe to True Mafia Tales for more intense stories about love, power, and family in the criminal underworld. We bring you compelling narratives that explore the complexities of dangerous men trying to be better fathers, strong mothers protecting their children against impossible odds, and families forged in the fires of violence and loyalty. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Imani made the right choice to run, or should she have told Jin Woo about Zara from the beginning? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep these stories coming. Thank you for watching True Mafia Tales, where every story reveals the human heart beneath the gangster's mask.